Chicago, where steaming, rat-ridden tenements are the raw material of riot, seemed the most likely to produce those northern explosions that were predicted in white America's anxiety over the Negro Revolution. No one expected the flashpoint of discontent to be in the sprawling, bungalowed 450 square miles of Los Angeles. Yet it did happen there, in an area holding 1/6 of the county's 523,000 Negroes. Watts is a ghetto, but not a slum, as the term is known in older cities. There are streets of trim, lower middle-class homes, and there are squalid areas of condemned houses with people living in them. 2/3 of the adults have less than a high school education. 1 in 8 is illiterate. Of every 10 homes, 9 were built before 1939. 1 in 5 is deteriorated. Watts has the lowest average income rate in Los Angeles County, $4,000 per year, compared with more than $8,000 per year for the white community. Almost 60% of the Watts families receive some sort of welfare, against an unemployment rate that holds around 30%. 1 of every 3 teenagers comes from a broken home. The school dropout rate is more than twice that of the city overall. Most residents are newcomers who joined the modern gold rush to California of the past 25 years. Many are newcomers from the most backward parts of the Deep South, poor and ignorant Negroes who have no skills to offer a big city employer, no desire for classroom learning, not even the knowledge of how to live in urban surroundings, often not even the knowledge of how to use plumbing.
In the late 60s, a rash of riots turned many urban enclaves to smoldering ash. For years, white residents had abandoned their inner cities, finding sanctuary in new suburban developments. In addition, the economic basis of the cities had been ravaged as factory after factory closed down. The now deindustrialized American city was becoming a dilapidated and racially segregated wasteland. And just as blacks were finally being allowed into good union jobs, those jobs were evaporating. This state of affairs was made worse by the fact that with the flight of white homeowners, the municipal tax base was shrinking, and so local government's ability to pay for social programs and maintain the large tenement housing projects became difficult. This was a perfect cocktail for rebellion. To many elites, this wave of unrest looked like a potential black revolution, a fear-stoked Cold War paranoia. Therefore, in response, President Lyndon Johnson commissioned a study to look at all the root causes of this black revolt, the Kerner Commission, the National Advisory on Civil Disorders. The report noted that one way to quell the violence was to make strategic concessions to black power in the cultural field. In practical terms, this meant placing more black faces on television and in news media. In this sense, although the black power that framed the urban rebellions of the 60s may have been defeated in political and economic terms, it did succeed culturally.
Is it too much to ask you to grant us human dignity? Should we be put down and shot to death for this request? If so, you can aim your guns. What the hell do you think we care about dying if you're going to deny us the right to live?
Long and the short of it, we're talking about economics. You know, you take an actor like, let's say, Sidney Poitier. This guy was a box office draw for so many years. Then all of a sudden, blacks can't make it in film. Forget about it. Blacks don't make films that make money. Now Richard Pryor, he is so much in demand, he's booked up for the next 5 years. Everyone says, that was lucky. It was a phenomenon. Here comes Eddie Murphy. Now he's booked up. So the phenomena that we talk about in Hollywood, that's all in our heads. That's to keep us holding on to what we've got so that you can't get in. Unfortunately, the blacks are visible. So when you say you can't get in and you speak about blacks, you can point to a color. The same thing applies to young white filmmakers. They don't let them in either, unless they're family or relative. They got to fight too. Women, they got to fight. It's Hollywood holding on to its established order so that no one else can get in and get a piece of that money.
The 1948 Paramount Consent Decree marked a financially trying moment for the motion picture industry as they lost monopoly power over movie theaters. This, coupled with big-budget box office bombs and advancements in television, led to more people staying home and watching the boob tube. The numbers were down for the major studios, and they desperately needed a new strategy. One way was to cut production costs and make films for a smaller, more centralized market. Instead of trying to make movies that would appeal to a wide variety of consumers, you could make small, niche, mini blockbusters. In this case, it was the Blackbusters that came in and saved Hollywood from its fiscal failures.
Got a sweet, sweet back. Won't bleed me.
You keep the faith in me, and you my man. You my favorite man. Can you take it, baby? Every dollar we make, the Guinness get 20, the police get 40, and Goldbergs get 50. Anybody can tell you that don't add up to $1. That adds up to $1.10.
This was serendipitous timing for the advent of what Beverly Hills NAACP chapter president Junius Griffith called Blaxploitation. Capital flight from urban cities, coupled with deindustrialization, left many movie theaters in disarray. If they hadn't closed their doors, they were on their way out. But Sweetbacks' badass song created such a buzz that people went back multiple times to see it, reminiscent of what people would see with Star Wars just 6 years later. On a budget of $150,000, this includes a $50,000 loan from Bill Cosby, Sweetback grossed $15.2 million at the box office. Since the major studios could no longer determine what would be played in the movie houses, a majority of motion picture productions were independent in this era. Sweetback had shown the majors and everyone else the pathway to instant success: black films. These new films would not be portraying valiant, asexual Negroes with perfect vernacular. These were ghetto tales of drug-dealing pimps and vengeful prostitutes. With a mix of white and black directors and an endless stable of extremely talented, out-of-work black actors, for a short time, profits from these movies were astronomical. This was the era of the super nigga. The plot was simple. Valorize the most criminal elements of the black urban community, get a good soundtrack, and it was money in the bank. Major Hollywood studios even rewrote white characters to fit within this paradigm. But how much is too much?
Black's image, we have no image. Our image is everything that's bad, you know. The term white and black, the white hat and the black hat. Black symbolizes the bad guy. Now, what did happen in those days, the so-called black exploitation films, is that white producers put together cheap films, took advantage of a hungry black movie-going audience, took advantage of hungry actors and actresses, paid them very little money, and stole all the profits, which basically came from that hungry black movie-going.
Some critics say that the Shafts and the Slaughters are unreal super blacks, and that Priest, the Harlem dope pusher in Superfly, is a negative image for black youngsters. Still other voices say that until blacks control their own films, there will always be stereotyped images. To discuss the facets of the black film dilemma, we have with us Ron O'Neill, who played Priest in Superfly, and Hugh Robertson, who edited Midnight Cowboy and many other films, and he's just directed his first feature film, Melinda. There's a lot of controversy raging in black communities from New York to Los Angeles over the images being created in black films by the film industry. And as the center of part of this controversy, Ron, how do you see your role in Superfly, as a positive force or a negative one?
Wow, what a question. Well, I'll tell you, Jim, obviously I consider it a positive one, or I never would have done the film. I helped to write the film, my role in particular. You see, when we begin to discuss the criticism of black films, you have this duality involved, this two-level thing. You see, you have the man in the street, his actual condition, and the way he actually lives, the way we actually live in America, and then you have all the things that people keep going around saying, you see. And when we made Superfly, we made it about the way things actually are. And we hoped it would be judged and criticized on that basis. But from my observation, you know, Superfly has been largely criticized from some you know, at some sphere, some plane, some plateau, you know, that has no bearing on the film. It's like, you know, it's like if you're going to discuss, you know, African dance, I mean, it's like, you know, the Bolshoi ballet teacher, you know, doing a criticism of African dance. I mean, it does not apply.
How do you explain the popularity of Superfly in spite of the criticism that it received? I mean, the adverse criticism.
Well, it goes back to that duality again. You see, you have the masses of people, black and white, you know, and Superfly is played to an awful lot of white people, by the way. It's the only way you can do $19, $20 million. And we've been in Boston 17 weeks, and we ran out of black people in 3 weeks in Boston, you know.
With the success of the blaxploitation genre, there was some pushback from the black political establishment, primarily the NAACP and the Urban League. They found the one-dimensional, stereotypical characterizations of blacks to be detrimental. The Super Nigga era was antithetical to the wholesome images that black people had fought hard to see on film. Mammy images were replaced with sassy, vengeful prostitutes. The timid, servile black man was replaced with the jive-talking, drug-dealing, drug-using, pimp anti-hero. The black political class didn't see this as an advancement of the people. They saw this as a giant step backward. These negative stereotypes played right into the hands of conservative politicians who were looking to roll back the Great Society reforms. It is no accident that during the height of blaxploitation, we also see the birth of the welfare queen.
It was the same size as the one we inherited 8 years ago. There'd been no growth. And in some departments, this meant an increase of as much as 66% in the workload. Mm-hmm. But part of that were the welfare reforms.
Right.
Welfare was increasing here in California, 40,000 cases a month. And we left with about 400,000 fewer people on welfare than there were 4 years ago. This saved the taxpayers about $1 billion, but what was equally important, we were spread so thin we couldn't do what we should have done for the really needy, the really deserving. Right. And we were able to increase their grants by way of those reforms 43%.
Eventually, market oversaturation and poor production quality started to lead to losses at the box office. The era of blaxploitation was coming to an end, and sadly, many of the stars of these films were cursed by their successes. They had been typecast in roles that Hollywood, and later Black America, would soon deem unsuitable for the screen or TV. This would keep them out of film and major roles for years. But would the rise of respectable middle-class icons like Cosby and Spike Lee mark the end of blaxploitation?
Now, how did your film, among what must be a lot of films from unknown directors, unknown black directors and all kinds, to get to the point where it got seen at all? The odds against it are overwhelming.
Well, we killed ourselves to make the film, and then the world premiere of the film was at the San Francisco Film Festival this past March 28th, and we invited all the distributors that could handle this type of film. Not the big Hollywood studios, but they have middle-sized distributors. Mm-hmm. And we showed the film, and that's when the bidding war started. Island Pictures picked it up. We opened here in New York.
They call it a bidding war?
Well, that's what happened.
Uh-huh.
It opened August 28th here in New York, and there's a period in August where all the Hollywood films have opened, and there's a slot that if you have a good film, you could catch fire, and that's what happened.
Yeah. Does it seem unreal in any way? Did you expect to hit with this one?
We expected it. I expected it. But I thought that it would have taken a little longer than it did, but we shot right out of the gate.
Meaning? Oh, shot right out of the gate?
Yeah.
I thought you were using a technical film term, because there's a gate on the, I'll explain to them, there's a gate on the, what? Camera or projector?
Camera.
Okay.
The late 70s and early 80s marked a departure for black faces on the silver screen in starring roles. Race films were deemed unprofitable compared to the new strategy of market saturation that ushered in the new blockbuster era. While the cost-cutting niche genre strategy worked to get the studios out of financial purgatory in the early part of the 70s, the profits paled in comparison to the wider reach of more Anglo-inspired cinema. Blacks, and most people of color, were reduced to supporting and stereotypical comic relief roles. The urban environment was now the crime-ridden wasteland that had to be reckoned with or allowed avoided on screen. It would be replaced with the homogeneous suburb or the infinite vastness of space.
Everyone said no one is interested in seeing a black comedy. You know, Oscar, blacks want to see violence, and these are white producers, studio executives telling me, you know, Oscar, blacks want to see violence and action and get whitey. I said, look, I want to say, that stuff is dead, you know? That stuff is dead. Nobody wants to see that shit anymore. Excuse the expression. Who cares about get whitey? Even whitey doesn't care about get whitey. So what we got to do is do some other things. Everyone says, Oscar, comedy, no, blacks don't want to see comedy. I said, let's do it. The budget was small. We got together and we did it, and it made a lot of money. From that film came a lot of the television stuff that you see now on television. That's My Mama, The Jeffersons, etc., etc., etc. From that film. And it was a fight getting it made.
This focus on mass-marketed, big-grossing films was a massive success. The end of the 70s and 80s brought us the Star Wars trilogy, the Indiana Jones movies, Jaws, Superman, and many more. Another effect of the success in the blockbuster era of cinema was the rise of art films. Art films are risky projects for major studios because the director's vision was not one that was going to be focus grouped, created for mass consumption, or read for duplication in the form of sequels. Indeed, it might be offensive to certain bourgeoisie sensibilities. The political economy undergirding this was the proliferation of film schools, foundation money, and the need for studio tax write-offs. This enabled some great smaller budget films to be made and distributed.
With France, and he won the Best New Film Director Award at the Cannes Film Festival there. Please welcome the man who wrote it, directed it, and starred in it. The movie is She's Gotta Have It. The man is Spike Lee. I gotta ask you something. You know what's amazing to me is that, you know, their movies are made for so much money. and you shot this film in 12 days and spent $175,000. $175,000, they pay people like, you know, great stars like Warren Beatty just to think about making a movie. They pay him more than you used on the whole budget. How'd you ever do in 12 days for that money?
Well, we'd have liked to have more money. That's all the money we had, and I couldn't wait around for a studio to call me.
Yeah.
So we just had to make the film ourselves, and that's the way we did it.
But how'd you economize? How'd you cut the corners? I mean, how'd you do it?
Well, it was all non-union. There was a group of people like myself who are young and hungry, and we wanted to have a vehicle that we get our names out there. So films can be done for that.
For that money?
For that money.
But you shot it all in one section of Brooklyn, right, in 12 days?
My neighborhood, Fort Greene, Brooklyn, which is downtown Brooklyn.
Oh, so you just stayed in downtown Brooklyn? We did not invite them. I don't know how they got in. And then you used a lot of your family in this, right?
Yeah, but that was not economical.
You mean they charge you a lot of money, your family?
No, I have a very talented family,
Yeah.
so it had nothing to do with money. I just used it. My father, Bill Lee, was an accomplished jazz musician.
Yeah.
He did the score. My sister acted it. My brother, David, he did the still photographs that are in the film.
Yeah, well, you know what we ought to do is actually we ought to show some of the film to the audience. A lot of people did see it, you know, and we ought to show some of the film. So here it is. Watch your monitors, and at home, no, don't watch the television. Watch the refrigerator, of course.
Spike Lee's rise was a counterpoint to that of his predecessor, Melvin Van Peebles. He didn't need the carnivalesque exploitive imagery to bring attention to his productions, and he wasn't trying to see his films as the definitive street depiction of black life. Indeed, Lee wanted to tell the story of the life he understood all too well, upper middle class black life. The success of Lee's first film, She's Gotta Have It, wasn't dependent on the black masses to view multiple showings. It required the approval of Anglo tastemakers. When shown at the San Francisco Film Festival in front of a predominantly white audience, they loved it. Lee was marketed as part of a new black renaissance of artists who were contrary to the ghetto stereotype that dominated black film just a decade prior. This shift in film reflected the inclusion of more black people into the upper and middle classes of American life. The Cosby Show in a Different World marked an end to otherwise offensive portrayals of black life on the television screen, and the ascendance of Lee allowed for a more diverse portrayal of black life. Sadly, both men would be hit with backlash from their films and TV shows that didn't characterize the authentic black experience.
New information tonight about the arrest of Tyrone Robinson, the suspect in the killing of Huey Newton. We showed you Robinson making his first court appearance yesterday. Today, police confirmed that a friend and relative of the suspect put investigators on his trail. The relative knew what kind of gun had been used before that information was made public, so police were quick to follow the leads. Robinson is scheduled to enter his plea next Tuesday.
This is Los Angeles, gang capital of the nation.
It just goes on and on, you know. Either they don't know, don't show, don't care about what's going on in the hood.
Soaked in Daniel Moynihan's underclass ideology, the post-Spike Lee portrayal of black life reverted back to some of the trappings of the early days of Blaxploitation. Films now had to be centered in violent ghettos and have a heavy dose of drugs, violence, and fatherless, wayward black youth. Movies like Boyz in the Hood, Menace to Society, and the like seemed as if they had been custom-made advertising campaigns for the 1994 crime bill.
Rape in the first degree, sodomy in the first degree, sexual abuse in the first degree, attempted murder in the second degree.
This is Alec Roberts in New York. There were more indictments today in the brutal gang rape of the 28-year-old Wall Street executive. 5 teens between the ages of 15 and 17 were charged with numerous rape, sodomy, and assault counts. Pleas by their attorneys for bail were denied.
You've seen these young children come before you, Judge. You've seen what they look like. You've seen the mass hysteria that's in the paper. Perhaps that was some advantage of having them to come before you so you could actually see these children.
All of the defendants gave videotaped statements to police implicating themselves or others. But some of their attorneys charged today that police obtained the confessions by force.
The first statement, he said he had nothing to do with it, and they put pressure on him, a lot of pressure. He was slapped around, and it is our contention that whatever statements he made were the product of psychological and physical coercion.
But one of the teens, 14-year-old Clarence Thomas, was not indicted. He walked out of court, but could be indicted later. Meanwhile, the rape victim, who remains comatose, took a turn for the worse. She has contracted pneumonia.
We still have her on the ventilator, and we're going to keep her on it until we see for sure how things are developing. But this last problem is under control.
Although police have not said the attack was racially motivated, the jogger was white and her alleged attackers black, some members of the black community charged the arrests are a racially motivated rush to judgment. In New York, this is Alec Roberts.
Capitalizing on the growing success of hip-hop, these movies were simply a continuation of the Blaxploitation era of the early 70s. Pimp out black trauma on the screen, but the violence had to be less over-the-top and more gritty and real. The super nigga was dead, but he was replaced with something that was less comical and cool. This was the rise of the super predator.
I cannot tell you how much it means to have you step into the role as our king and be holding it with such grace and poise and joy.
That was so great. I think we should let's move in for a close-up of that. Let's get a close-up of that right there.
I actually saw it 4 times. I do have a life, but I saw it 4 times. I saw it once with my girlfriend. Also, I want to thank you for having your suit on for most of the movie, because when your chest was out, she was getting a little excited and I felt insecure, so thank you for that.
Well, for me, as the mother of a young son, my son's childhood has been defined by Barack Obama and now Black Panther, so thank you.
Hey, that's way too much praise. Barack Obama.
No.
You are gorgeous. Gorgeous family.
That is unexpected.
Gorgeous for the
Thank you. Wow, what a surprise.
In this current blockbuster superhero movie era, no film was more anticipated than the on-screen arrival of the standalone Black Panther movie. To this day, Black Panther is Marvel's highest-grossing standalone superhero movie, outpacing the ensemble classic Civil War. The black community came out in droves to see how Marvel would depict the mythical home of Black Panther, Wakanda. In the lore of the comic, Wakanda is the most technologically advanced nation on Earth, sitting on a massive reserve of an indestructible alien mineral called vibranium. Since the Wakandans didn't want any other tribes to know about this discovery, they were able to hide their small nation for generations. They also never were victims of European colonization, so this meant this fictional African country became a utopia in the eyes of many black people. The mythical Wakanda became a hopeful goal of what black life would be if not for colonization, slavery, and white supremacy. You even saw NBA players doing the Wakanda Forever salute during the national anthem. Why so much love for a monarchy? Were black people really opining for a return to tribalized feudalism? Having found the most indestructible mineral on Earth and having such an advanced society, why did Wakandans' most fierce warriors need spears? Why the hell did they ride animals into battle? We know the answers to these questions, and that is that no matter how we try to mask these offensive stereotypes of what Africa is, the mass audience isn't ready to see a battle in Africa in an urban center, so you do it in the vastness of the jungle or savanna. Black Panther was a box office hit and merchandising bonanza for Marvel. The success of Black Panther led to other black and non-white superhero movies and streaming shows being released. So, is racism over now? Was that ever really the goal? The political bankruptcy of Black Power did translate into cultural currency in the mid-60s to present day. Blackness is marketable, and we've seen it be profitable beyond the small milieu of the black community. As my co-host Pascal Robert wrote in a 2019 article published in Black Agenda Report, the seduction of black popular culture is used as a mechanism for social control. In the wake of the protests of 2020, we saw Capitol make a mad dash to label #BLM on any and everything. Streaming platforms even added the curated Black Voices section. So does this mean we're free now?